Namaste to all the viewers joining us from across the world. I'm Nidhi Kumar, your host for today. We're extremely excited to bring to you the Eat Right India initiative of the FSSAI adopted by Herbalife Nutrition in Karnataka. Herbalife is all committed to make the state healthy and safe and acknowledging our broadcasting partners, the Mitro app. Well, COVID 19 has tested our food systems that the most marginalized in India rely upon. In the context of food and nutrition shortages, accessibility and affordability of healthy, sustainable food becomes even more challenging. Millions of households in formerly food secure regions of the world have fallen into severe food insecurity. Levels of hunger and malnutrition have doubled within the space of just a few weeks. Today, we will discuss healthy and sustainable diets in cardio related problems with Dr. Ashok Seth, Padma Bhushan and Padma Shri awardee, President Asia Pacific Society of Interventional Cardiology, and chairman at the very prestigious Fortis Escorts Heart Institute. Namaste and welcome, Doctor.
Namaste,
All
Nidhi
of
ji.
yours. Dr. Ashok Seth is an Indian interventional cardiologist, a recipient of also the Order of Isabella the Catholic, was honored by the Government of India with the fourth highest Indian civilian award of Padma Shri in 2003, followed by Padma Bhushan, the third highest Indian civilian award in 2015. Many thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Sir. So what are the particular challenges that you feel have come in now that we talk of Lambda, Zika, Kappa, and all these variants? And tell us more about the Delta Plus variant. How concerned should all of us in India be?
I think you'll know by all this that the virus is intent to stay with us, to multiply, to adapt, to change its form, to change its shape. So anything that we do against the virus, this virus is being very clever and smart. Now, all viruses replicate, mutate, that's very well known. But this is one time that we have to be determined to beat the virus because the virus is determined to stay. And you can see what happened last year. And just when we were thinking that it's all over and that the virus is going away, came this huge second wave with the Delta virus. The Delta virus is now perhaps the scourge of the rest of the world again. And the third waves are back in the West with the Delta virus creating havoc in the United States, in the UK, in all the European countries, the whole of South America and Asia. We've got to understand that we only have at the moment, even with combined concentrated effort of the last 1.5 years amongst all scientists, the policymakers, the regulators, all put together the best brains, have created only 2 tools to combat this virus. And those arms are vaccine and the COVID appropriate behavior. These are the only 2 tools we have. You saw that even when one gets affected by serious COVID disease, which happened in the second wave with thousands of people getting admitted in serious condition, even then there is no drug which works against this virus, as you know. You remember that remdesivir was out of stock and soon we were told, and the policy and the scientists told us that remdesivir is not of any use anyway. If we talked about any of the drugs, it was all finally not much evidence for it anyway. So really, at the end of the day, we know that we still have this huge tool with us, which is masking, which is distancing, which is avoiding crowds, and which is making sure we have sanitation. And if we follow that, any virus and any mutation, we will protect ourselves and others from any virus and any mutation. So that remains our most important, should we say, armor. It remains our most important weapon against the virus. And secondly, if we can get ourselves vaccinated rapidly, fast, and majority of the population vaccinated as soon as possible, that will bring the second weapon in. These 2 weapons are needed for the virus to gradually disappear or at least put itself down. It may never disappear in our lives, but at least we would be able to normalize over a period of time. And that won't happen for a year, I would say. But if we look 2 years ahead and 3 years ahead, perhaps this is the two things that we need to get this virus down. And finally, I would just say that that is why we may be talking about the mutations. We may be talking about the Delta plus. The third important thing is genomic surveillance. We have to know what is happening to the virus. We have to know which is the virus propagating the disease. And we have to actually be, it's almost like we've got an enemy and we've got to have surveillance on the enemy to know its actions before it attacks us so that we can take the preventive measures.
For millions of people who are watching this program, sir, I would like you to tell them how vaccine protects against this virus, because there is still a hesitancy in the rural areas. There's still many myths to be broken.
This is so important. And I think our next problem is going to be the hesitancy as the virus, as the vaccine numbers are now getting bigger and bigger, and that we're getting a better supply of vaccine, thankfully to all the policies of the government and the regulators who've really created a great system now, which is centralized, which is procurement, distribution, pricing is also centralized, that this is the best system a country as huge as India could actually have for ramping up the vaccination drive, which is happening now. But I think the next biggest issue is two. Firstly, making sure that enough vaccine distribution happens in the semi-rural and rural areas, and that it should not just be located to the cities and the big cities or the semi-urban. And secondly is this hesitancy. Hesitancy is all around. It's still happening in the educated people. It's happening in the undereducated, and it's certainly extremely high in the rural areas because of misapprehensions around it. Clearly, my big message through you and to your viewers is vaccine is a must. Vaccine is safe. Vaccine is the most effective tool if we want to protect ourselves from virus, firstly, and if we want to defeat the virus. And let me just explain to you how. Firstly, vaccine protects us from getting serious illnesses. We may still get COVID. After all, you may have heard that it's only 70% effective or 80% effective. What it means is that we may still have a small chance of catching COVID, but it will almost be, if we are vaccinated fully, it will almost be like a common flu. थोड़ा जुकाम हुआ, थोड़ी खांसी हुई, थोड़ी जर्दी हुई, और वो 2-4 दिन में चला गया. But it will prevent us from getting admitted to the hospital. It will prevent us from our oxygens going low. It will prevent all of us from those situations of ventilation, and it will prevent us from death. Now, those are very important. The second way the vaccine helps is that it actually prevents us transferring the virus to someone else. We decrease the chances of affecting others in our house who may or may not be vaccinated at the moment, and who, even if vaccinated, may actually be elderly and therefore have comorbid conditions and more prone to disease. Even they can get a COVID the second time if we pass it on them. Vaccines prevent our transfer of virus to our others, to our relatives, to our friends, to our nearby. So that's so important a responsibility that we have. And finally, it's a national responsibility, because if we get nearly 85% of our population vaccinated, then we will automatically prevent the virus from growing. You can imagine how the virus replicates in our throat, in our upper respiratory tract. And when we cough it out, after a few days, it actually goes to someone else and replicates there. But it requires that medium to multiply. If the virus does not find a medium to multiply, it gradually dies down in the next 4 to 5 days. So if everyone's vaccinated, that's what we call herd immunity, where the virus may transfer from me to another person. I'm vaccinated, so it can't grow here. It transfers to another person and finds it can't grow there. It transfers to a third person and can't replicate there. It dies out. So what happens in a herd is when 80% are vaccinated and the virus doesn't grow, everybody gets protected. And therefore, it's our responsibility to be a part of those vaccinated so that the whole country is protected. So actually, it just boils down to the single fact: is the best weapon that we have at the moment. Please remember, side effects are extremely rare. In fact, side effects of any vaccination are 1,000th time the crocin tablet we all take for any headache and any fever. 1,000th time of that. It is actually 1,000 time, probably 10,000 time of any common drug that you know. It's probably even safer than car driving. You're more likely to have a car accident during car driving than to have any accident from taking a vaccination. So why don't we want to protect ourselves? Otherwise, we would live in the scourge of this virus all our lives with masks, with distancing, and never normalize. The only way to normalize is vaccinate yourselves. That's why countries like USA, that's why countries like UK, that's why countries like Israel, who vaccinated a large proportion of the population, are normalizing. So if you want to normalize, if you want to get back to that original life, please get vaccinated.
Absolutely. So from a pandemic to an endemic, that's how we go. If we look at the Spanish flu, when it came in 1915, it took 5 years, or 18, it took 5 years to go away. So we cannot wish away the virus, but we have to take all precautions. If we talk of some of the challenges that you are seeing in cardio-related problems, what are those, sir?
So we've actually, it's interesting, and it's more so with Delta virus, well, the second wave, should we say, that we're seeing more cardiac problems than we saw in the first wave last year. And it's important to understand that we're seeing them not necessarily at the time when the person is affected, but a lot more during recovery of the patient from COVID.
Long COVID.
Yeah, and we say long COVID, you're right. We say it when it's 2 to 3 months past the COVID, but we see it soon after discharge also, the virus effects on the heart. Let me tell everyone that the virus is known to affect the heart, and COVID virus specifically, because it acts on the heart by increasing the clotting of the blood. Therefore, that leads to clots developing in the arteries of the heart, or arteries and causing heart attacks, arteries to the brain causing strokes, arteries to the lungs causing an embolism phenomenon of the lung arteries. And these have been recognized even in the first wave. But what's happening more in the second wave is that the virus is also known to affect the heart muscle, that inflammatory reaction. When the heart is a muscular pump, and when the heart muscle gets affected, its efficiency goes down and the heart becomes weak, and patients go into heart failure or shock. We're certainly seeing more of that this time than we saw it earlier. And that may be as a result of this new mutant, which was responsible for this, majorly responsible for the second wave. We also see the heart virus can also known to affect the conduction system of the heart. You know, a heart beats at 80 per minute and 98, and that's practically because we've got an inbuilt conduction system, like a battery which runs our heart. This virus can affect the conduction system. And we've known that it can make the heart rate very slow or very fast. And now we're seeing numerous patients who complain of palpitations, complain suddenly of their heart rate going very fast. And when we actually check them out, yes, their heart rates are running at 110, 120, 130, 140. Some of these are just nuisances, and some of these are serious arrhythmias, which can lead to sudden cardiac arrest as well. So I think that we are now very, very observant, very cautious about all our patients who discharge from COVID. It has been seen that the more serious the COVID, the greater the affection of the heart. But surprisingly, even with mild COVID, we are now facing these problems of heart being affected. So for every COVID patient who goes home, we actually first tell them, don't ignore any symptoms of chest pain, of discomfort, or of palpitations. Secondly, for all COVID patients, we do an EKG within a month of their discharge, an ECG and an echocardiogram to know whether the heart has been affected in any significant manner or not. And for those who complain of palpitations, we also do a 24-hour Holter analysis to make sure that they're not suffering from any serious heart rhythm or heart rate disorder. It is important and a must. And by the way, we tell them not to exercise over a period of, and not to do severe exercise, to mild to moderate, graded level of exercise after recovery from COVID over the next few weeks, and not to do severe exercise up to 3 months' time. And I say this serious exercise because many of our patients prior, and this time it had affected a lot of young patients, as you know, many of them were used to weightlifting, strenuous exercises, gymming, marathon running, and they wanted to recover from COVID and prove to themselves that they're still as fit and want to get back to long distance cycling, marathon running, gymming.
And they had strokes.
And that's right.
Many of them did not survive.
We were worried about them. We were truly worried about them. So that's the importance of heart and COVID, increasingly so this time.
Doctor, if we relate this to nutrition, now there are two questions that I need to ask you. We all know that half of India or 3/4 of India cannot afford to eat right. उनके पास खाने के लिए लिमिटेड चीजें हैं. वो कोविड के बाद भी जाएंगे तो उनको समोसा मिलेगा या ब्रेड पकोड़ा मिलेगा तो वो वही खाएंगे. ऐसे में किस तरह की हमारी नीति होनी चाहिए या पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए कि उन लोगों को सही खाने के बारे में हम जानकारी दे सके? क्या कहेंगे आप?
निधि जी, आपने बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन और एक बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट प्रॉब्लम रेज की है. इनफैक्ट इन आवर ओन कंट्री, where at one time, people who can afford to eat are going after fad diets of starving for 24 hours.
Yes.
Each time saying
this we call it intermittent fasting.
We call it intermittent fasting. And at the same time, there's someone else sitting who hasn't got the food, and that's why he's doing intermittent fasting. Yes. So it's so sad. Yes, firstly, let's talk about the ones who, unfortunately, we'll come to the policies. I think you're so right. Let's just talk about the policy issue. I think nutrition, food, which is food, hygiene, sanitation, and control of infections is the basis of how any country should look after its own people. That has to be the basis. Sanitation, food, hygiene, and infection control. So if we don't do that, then we're wrong. So that's where water and sanitation and hygiene comes in. Nobody is looking for high-tech medicine being provided free. Even the best countries can't do that. England has failed, America has failed in trying to provide high-tech medicine to everywhere, and extremes of situations have happened. We might call them developed countries, but they're actually suffering from those situations. But basic healthcare constitutes all this, and basic well-being constitutes all this. So therefore, the policies must revolve around healthy food. And by the way, healthy food is not expensive. Healthy food is actually the least expensive food because it talks about what is talking about. It talks about vegetables. We're an agriculture country. We're supposed to grow vegetables. Every farmer is supposed to grow vegetables. Every farmer is supposed to eat those vegetables. So we are talking about vegetables. We actually, if you ask me, what is the most expensive food? It is the food for dieting that we call it. Because if you get back to the best healthy food is raw stuff. We're talking about raw grains. हम तो सफेद आटा ढूंढने जाते हैं कि सफेद आटा कहाँ से मिल रहा है. The most refined atas, the most refined oils. It is not the olive oil of the West. That's a good oil, fine. But it's even the mustard oil of the villages, which is actually very good.
भारत का सरसों का तेल, बिल्कुल.
सरसों का तेल, and सरसों का तेल is one of the best oils for using. So we're talking about crude grains. We're talking about roughage. We're talking about not the white atta, but ragi ka atta, and we're talking about the whole meal atta, and we're talking about every of those. We're talking about fruits. We're talking about vegetables.
Seasonal fruits, would you say?
Seasonal fruits, and many of these fruits are truly available even in the smaller towns and villages because villagers do grow them. Actually, we have missed out on many aspects of healthy eating because we move to more and more fashionable and refined type of products. And then we go back a circle to buy the same at an expensive cost. All those now refined, the crude stuff, the whole meal bread will cost us more than the other bread. The whole meal atas will cost more, the whole meal oats are going to cost us more, and they're just becoming now more and more packaged in a nice manner when all our lives, and certainly when I was a child, and certainly my parents never ate any refined stuff. They all ate truly out of the ground, should we say, and in a manner which was far more nutritious than what we do now.
Doctor, how about salt and sugar and intake of such like things for obesity?
So if I was going to talk about policies, I think policies need to exist around trans fats a lot. This is something which is West has been taking more about it. You see, we talk about oils, and we always talk about telling the patients, and the patients first ask us, "Kya tel bada kharab hai? And, hame oily cheezein nahi khani chahiye." And it's not actually the oil which is bad. I mean, ghee, for example, we may talk about ghee in a bad manner, but actually ghee is probably better than much of the oils we've taken subsequently. And that's why I even tell my patients, ek do chammach ghee ke zarur khao din mein. But what is bad is the trans fats. What is bad is the recooked oil. The ones which we actually see at halwais many times, where they're cooking oil again.
Kachoris and samosas.
Yes. Samosas, and this recooking that oil. So the reason kachoris and samosas are bad is the oil which is being reheated and cooked. And they could a lot of trans fats in them. Again, stored foods. Stored foods are the ones which actually have trans fats in them. Those are the bad oils. Fast foods. Some of the fast foods, if trans fats is not written on them, and if they're not particular, then they could actually be having a lot of trans fats in them. And finally, we therefore have, and that's why many of the restaurants have been advised to put the trans fats of their food, especially in the West. It's a norm that every restaurant should put down how much trans fats is in their food. So it's the eating out is more related to the oil that we eat, the bad oil that we eat, rather than anything else to do with the oil. And that is what we've got to be careful about, the trans fats in our food. So that brings us to the same thing. Meat is not bad, egg is not bad. I think the point to tell is extremes of diet are bad. Extreme of anything that you take is bad. And I think if you eat home cooked food mostly, then you're going to be eating healthy and good.
Absolutely. Doctor, what about supplements? I mean, we need to have vitamins, multivitamins, and all these dietary supplements, or D or C or calcium, because of the pandemic. And we never know how many pandemics India sees or the world sees in the years to come. So a lot of people do not get sunlight, even though India is known for its sun. You're all indoors. Even children are indoors now. So what is that we should now incorporate as supplements also? Maybe magnesium, zinc, because people are taking an overdose of zinc.
Firstly, I must compliment you that you're absolutely clued on and very knowledgeable about all aspects of healthcare and health.
Thank you.
Your questions are so specific. I say questions so specific that I know that there's knowledge out there, and that's what you're imparting to your viewers. To tell you frankly, vitamin D is a big concern, certainly in our country and across the world, because we've known that vitamin D is found so deficient because we are no more getting exposed to sun and sunlight. Even in our usual daily lives, हम तो कहते हैं बड़ी गर्मी है, हम बाहर निकलते हैं, कार के अंदर घुस जाते हैं, कार के अंदर से निकलते हैं, घर के अंदर घुस जाते हैं. We are not exposed. And by the way, to get your daily quota of vitamin D, one requires to be arms exposed completely and upper body exposed completely for a duration of 1 hour from 11:30 to 12:30 to get a quota of vitamin D. So actually, I am sure what our population and in the semi-urban and urban areas, And the ones who bearing the most of the hardship without, exposed to the sun all the time are the ones who got the best vitamin D, but none of us have. And vitamin D is responsible for a number of disease process and lack of well-being. So it's clearly become, including heart diseases and others, it's clearly, and bone diseases, as you all know, it's clearly become one of our strategies to test people for vitamin D and to replace vitamin D. But if you
एनीमिया
talk
मुक्त भारत तो हम कर ही रहे हैं सर.
but if you talk about other vitamins, unless there's a specific deficiency, we are just actually, popping them in unnecessarily. And in a way, it is building up, it's buoying up a whole huge market of vitamins and mineral supplements. For example, the evidence for having high doses of vitamins and zinc in COVID is arguable. It's probably not there. And in fact, no country did it like the way we actually devoured the amount of zinc and vitamin D.
Zinc-O-Vid type. I've been popping it myself.
Vitamin C as ever. And no country has that in their curriculum. There may be some in vitro, which means bench in test tubes, data on shoving zinc into a test tube and seeing the coronavirus not surviving, but that doesn't translate into that happening into a human being. I must tell you that. So much of this was data, not from any clinical trials, but data from in vitro studies. Having said that, if one takes healthy diet, like we've said, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, nuts, raw food, loads of roughage, loads of grains, fiber, and loads of grains, then believe you me, we don't have any nutritional deficiency. Unfortunately, in villages, we do. The reason for that is because of the lack of nutrition, lack of the right type of diet, unfortunately, malnutrition. But unfortunately, the biggest amounts of vitamins are taken by people who can afford good diet and healthy diet. And those are the ones who are taking the maximum amount of vitamins in the country because they're buoying up a huge market. So the people who eat well and who can afford to eat the right things are the ones also popping in addition large amounts of nutrients and vitamins.
Earlier, we used to look at the West, doctor, for pumpkin, sesame, oatmeal, things like that. Now they are looking towards us for millets, giloy, amla, turmeric, all of that. These searches are going viral. यहाँ पे आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे? Are these the things that India needs to turn to, our roots? We have to get rooted to our heritage to maybe find answers for this?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, when it was said that haldi and avla all improve your immunity.
Moringa.
There's anything wrong with that. I think these are, in our own Ayurveda, we have history, and we have a long history of very many useful agents, and we shouldn't call them medicines, but usual adjuncts, which must be helping our body. It is absolutely important to understand our own heritage, our own, years and years of own understanding and history, and not to do away with that. The problem is not to think of them as medicines and replacements for many of the disease processes where you have established randomized trials of important medicines which can cure those conditions. But clearly, all this is an important aspect. And see, there was again an overdue of this during the COVID times for the same issues, because when you have a situation of a pandemic where there is no treatment available, then everything becomes a treatment. And it's a hit and trial, and everything claims to be a cure or a treatment or a prevention. Yes, immunity is an important. These probably all of them help the immunity. At least we don't know it. They can't harm us. And let's consider them as a part of healthy nutrition and healthy diet, which would actually prop up many of our systems. So you're right. Haldi is probably there, and many of those agents that you've talked about, the ingredients, the food items that you've talked about, are I'm convinced should form a part of a healthy diet.
Doctor, what is the daily diet that you recommend for a patient who's had post-COVID and also suffers with a heart disease? How does he replace the cholesterol content?
So here's clearly what I say. Avoid alcohol. No to smoking. To become a must. Okay? Because alcohol decreases your immunity. Smoking, of course, is going to harm your lungs anyway. It harms your heart, it harms your lung. In fact, you're creating a nidus, a great nidus for the virus to straight away affect your own selves. Having said that, the rest is good, healthy nutrition. Firstly, ghar ka khana. Ghar ka khana becomes the most important aspect. Not कि आप COVID से ठीक हुए तो then you say मैं बाहर का खाना खाऊंगा. Make sure that it's again the same things that we be talking about. Lot of green leafy vegetables, lot of food, and eat small amounts of meal frequently over the day rather than starve yourselves in between. You have to make sure that your last meal, though, is early rather than late at night, which means that it's 7 to 8 o'clock and no later than that. Drink plenty of water and have very good long sleep. Once we actually do that post-COVID, we are making sure that we're getting our body into the best milieu of nutrition, of health, of mental frame of mind, and of hygiene. And I was going to say, think positive and also not just do moderate exercise, but mental relaxation and yoga. Then we get ourselves in the best frame of mind for recovery from COVID. And that's going to be the vital aspect of it.
Absolutely. Doctor, one last question. अगर हम अब देखें तो पिछली तरह की तरह रेप्लिकेट हो रहा है, मतलब बढ़ते हैं केसेस केरल से, महाराष्ट्र से, फिर दिल्ली तक आ जाते हैं. वही प्रोसीजर अब दिखाई दे रहा है पिछले 3-4 दिन से. एंड ओनली 40 crores ऑफ आवर पॉपुलेशन स्टैंड्स वैक्सीनेटेड टिल डेट. तो इसमें किस तरह की सावधानी आप कहेंगे कि अपनी इम्यूनिटी के लिए क्या और चीजें हैं जिनका ध्यान रखा जाए? अगर फिटनेस की बात करें, ओवर एक्सरसाइज ना करें पर वॉक करें तो कितनी करें? लोग टाइमर लगा के स्मार्ट वॉचेस से वो सब अपने आप को मॉनिटर कर रहे हैं. डज दैट रियली वर्क? या जिस तरह हमारे ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स हुआ करते थे, वो सुबह अपना टहलने जरूर जाते थे, एक बार सुबह और एक बार शाम को. इट्स टाइम वी गो बैक टू दोस हैबिट्स, डॉक्टर.
So few things here, very nicely reminisced about, you're right about our parents and our grandfathers, even my childhood, I can say. Importantly, let's first understand that the second wave has not gone. If we actually start understanding the fact that Hindustan में जब second wave से शुरुआत हुई थी, तो मार्च में और February और मार्च में we only had 8,000 to 10,000 cases in the whole of India. And we actually went up to nearly 4 lakhs of cases in that wave within a period of 2 to 3 weeks. And we're still only down to anything between 40 and 50,000 for the last 2 weeks. So we haven't even bottomed out. So we are actually in a second wave, which may be the third
prolonged
wave.
Second wave, yes.
Correct, which may be a third wave, because the third wave may be happening in those very places that you talked about. So हम तो इस virus से हमें we have not got rid of the virus. We actually are still replicating it, और हम इसको और promote कर रहे हैं इस time पे. I think people need to understand this aspect that
COVID-appropriate behavior is not being followed. And I think, doctor, here one last thing I would like you to say.
मैं एक और कहूँगा, वो एक होता है ना कि helping your enemy.
वही है.
मैं तो ये कहूँगा कि ये एक हमारा नेशनल एनिमी है, और हम इसको इकट्ठे हमने लड़ना है. और लोग मास्क उतार के घूम रहे हैं इन अ फेज की दे आर हेल्पिंग द एनिमी. तो ये तो एक बहुत गद्दारी वाली बात हो गई ना नेशन से.
And they come back and kill others. Absolutely.
That's right. So we are actually, we cannot help the enemy. That is the first aspect. And so आपने कहा कि क्या करना चाहिए, तो yes, अगर एक्सरसाइज की बात है तो walking is the best exercise. It's the right exercise for good health. 40 minutes of walking, जिसमें से कि 5 मिनट वार्म अप हो, लास्ट का 5 मिनट वार्म डाउन हो, और 35 minutes of moderate to brisk speed of walking daily. Pranayam, yoga, things which make mental relaxation, things which actually expand your lungs and make sure that your breathing is right. And obviously, this is the best form of exercise that we need to do. Heavy weight lifting, long distance running, gymming are all actually in a way deterrent for any form, because they don't necessarily increase your immunity. They actually could decrease your immunity also if one actually stresses the body out intensely.
Absolutely.
और आपने एक और इसी में कुछ और
हाँ, मैं ये जानना
पूछना था
चाहती थी कि as a public health measure, I'm sure we're out of time, but I'll still continue, doctor. So interesting to talk to you. मैं चाहती थी, it was a vision in my mind. I mean, I may be totally wrong. We can edit this part. I just wanted to ask you, doctor, if we talk of healthcare, everybody uses a hospital. Everybody will get vaccinated if that is made compulsory, that you have to enter any hospital, government, rural, gram panchayat, any hospital, private hospital, only if you are vaccinated. तो मेरे दिमाग में तो यही आया.
बहुत अच्छा आपका है. आपका I would compliment your thoughts around this. In fact, France has already done this by saying that you may not even get a job. You will not be able to travel in any, you may not even get any of the compensations. आपकी तो कई चीजों की जो आप कहते हो ना कि मेरी राइट है, आपकी राइट्स कहीं उन्होंने स्टॉप कर दी हैं अगर आपके पास वैक्सीनेशन ना हो. Yes, we should get into that, provided once we have an adequate supply of vaccination, once we are actually sure that our supplies and equity distribution happens, which means कि वो छोटे छोटी जगहों पे, वो गांव में भी पहुंच जाए, वो हर एक जगह अवेलेबल हो. जैसे मैं कहता था ना कि वो हमको किसी 6 किलोमीटर दूर जाके क्यों वैक्सीनेट कराना पड़े, रोज हमारे कॉलोनी में ही क्यों ना वैक्सीनेशन सेंटर हो. जो मैं गांव की बात कर रहा हूं, हर गांव में क्यों ना एक वैक्सीनेशन सेंटर हो. लोगों को 15 किलोमीटर चल के कोई वैक्सीनेशन सेंटर में जाने की क्या जगह है. तब अगर हम उस लेवल पे पहुंच जाएंगे तो हम कहेंगे कि अगर आपने वैक्सीनेट नहीं कराया तो आपको राशन भी नहीं मिलेगा. यू आर नॉट एंटाइटल्ड टू राशन एनीमोर, यू आर नॉट एंटाइटल्ड टू जॉब्स एनीमोर, यू आर नॉट एंटाइटल्ड टू फ्री स्कूलिंग एनीमोर, यू आर नॉट एंटाइटल्ड टू एनीथिंग, क्योंकि तब हमारे पास हमने प्रोवाइड कर दी है और लोग नहीं ले रहे हैं. इस टाइम पे अनफॉर्चुनेटली वो सिचुएशन नहीं है जिसमें कि राइदर इक्विटेबल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन है ना प्रोक्योरमेंट्स हैं. अभी उस लेवल पे हम पहुंचे ही नहीं हैं. यस, मैं अगले साल ये जरूर कहूंगा जब हम कह लेंगे कि हमने मेजॉरिटी के लिए वैक्सीनेशन अवेलेबल है. अभी भी हमारी 30% पॉपुलेशन नहीं ले रही है. तो क्यों नहीं ले रही है? अब कीजिए सब कुछ का उनका काम बंद, कि उनकी नौकरी भी नहीं मिलेगी, न ही उनको कहीं ट्रैवल के लिए, जब वो बस में भी नहीं घुस सकेंगे अनलेस उनके पास वैक्सीनेशन सर्टिफिकेट ना हो. यही हमारा फ्यूचर होगा वैक्सीन हेजिटेंसी के लिए आज से 1 साल बाद.
And on that note, many thanks for joining us, Dr. Sethi. A special shout out to FSSAI, Eat Right Foundation, and Herbal Life Nutrition. We thank you for supporting us in this endeavor. As a generation, we have a strong belief that we want to live in a healthier world. So let's all work for a healthier India. Namaskar. Namaste. It is our absolute pleasure and privilege to have with us Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, Padma Shri Presidential Awardee, Senior Consultant Pediatrician, and a nephrologist. Many thanks for joining us, sir, on this special program by FSSAI, Eat Right, and of course, Herbal Life Nutrition. Sir, I want to ask you from a epidemiologically, I'll repeat this. So I want to ask you from a point of view of a doctor, how do you compare the COVID-19 first wave to the second wave or the onset of the third wave as India looks at it?
Yeah, so the first wave was bad. The second wave was more severe. It was more intense. We saw a lot more of case fatality. We saw the rapid progression of the disease, primarily because of the Delta strain. We are still not out of the second wave. Hopefully, our third wave will be much meeker, milder. And that will depend upon the mutation of the viruses going forward and the vaccinations. So if we can push the vaccination drive quickly, we may be able to we may able to blunten the effect of the third wave, maybe by end August or early September. So we need to keep our masks on. We need to promote the vaccination very aggressively. And extremely important is do not socialize, do not party, and do not forego the precautions.
As a doctor, what would you say? Since we're talking of eating right today, and it is important to eat right in the pandemic, how would you like to talk to us about immunity so that this flu can, pass away as a minor ailment instead of the unprecedented crisis that we saw in the second wave, doctor?
Yeah, so nutrition forms a very, very important overall part of our life, right from birth. In fact, right even from the antenatal period. So fetal growth is a direct correlation with your maternal nutrition. So we know that the mothers who are malnourished in pregnancy or who have severe deficiencies like anemia, calcium deficiency, or any other protein deficiency, children are born as preterms and small for date with lower birth weights. And that impacts the ongoing progress of the small infant. They become more critical and more sick. Ongoing, as far as once the child is born, beyond the age group of 6 to 9 months, when we start weaning, I think it has to be extremely scientifically modulated in terms of adequate amounts of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, with the adequate amount of minerals, vitamins, and trace elements. The most important part of your development, not only neurological or mental development, psychological development, it is actually the development of physical development is in the first 2 years. 80% of the child's growth potential is achieved before the second birthday. So it's very important that children have good home, primarily balanced diet. What should clearly be avoided is very deep fried food, junk food, aerated drinks, too much of chocolates, processed food. These are things which children and even beyond the age group of 2, right through till adolescence, should be kept away from. Childhood hypertension, childhood obesity, and other metabolic disorders are on the rise. So I think nutrition forms a very important part. And apart from that, there is now ongoing research and publications that your gut, that is your intestinal flora, your intestinal milli interior, is a direct correspondent to your body immunity.
Absolutely. And people are talking of a leaky gut, a bad gut. And at the same time, you're having lifestyle diseases and diseases related to obesity. India is the diabetes capital of the world, all of that. How do you look at effectively tackling malnutrition also? There is hunger, there is poverty. How do you look at tackling nutrition finance? What do you think of the policy changes that need to be made? A doctor like you, so qualified.
I think the critical part is that we have to keep our population under control. In this ever-increasing burst and exponential rise of childbirth, the lower middle income group and especially the below poverty line will find it very difficult to look at the two most important parts. One is nutrition and second is education. So I think we need to have a very good and strategic control at a national level of our reproductive rate, so to say. Second is, I think public education and public awareness is important at all levels, right from Zilla Parishads to primary healthcare centers to the local districts, the panchayats.
Anganwadis, yes.
Anganwadis, the ASHA workers. I think as much appropriate communication goes out to young mothers, it's important. Spacing of pregnancies is very important because the human body for a young lady takes time to recover, to build the nutrition base for the next pregnancy. So back-to-back pregnancies and things is often a disaster.
Absolutely. What kind of research do you feel should happen in health and nutrition in the context of the pandemic? Are we going to see more pandemics in the years to come?
Yeah, I think this is not the first and not the last pandemic. It's, this is a cycle of life. Viruses have to coexist with human beings and human beings must know how to beat the virus. So I think nutrition is an important part. We've seen collated data, meta-analysis that patients who are malnourished or who come from minorities or from a poorer socioeconomic group have 2 to 5 times more mortality in this pandemic. So I think going forward, I think we need more research on the deficiencies part, how to cover the deficiencies of various ingredients of the human diet. We need a very strong public awareness campaign, which should be ongoing 12 months a year, so that people know what to eat right and what not to eat. I think good health should be incentivized, especially from the school age group, so that they know that marks are not only achieved by scoring in subjects, but marks should be achieved if you keep good health. So a routine check of blood pressure, your body weight should be monitored at least on a monthly basis in school. I think parents should be counseled right from the school time that what good health is. I think the public awareness begins from schools. I think that's where the good health can begin from.
Absolutely. And lastly, I want you to suggest something that you feel may be important for healthcare infrastructure. Also, doctor, don't you think that for vaccination, if we incentivize the people more or tell them, that you cannot enter a hospital unless you're vaccinated, would that help?
Yeah, so I think that
going on tours, traveling, Mussoorie, Shimla, all of that, we have to make it compulsory somehow.
Yeah. So I think a vaccine immunity card, what we call as a vaccine passport, is the need of the hour. I think all communicable diseases beyond COVID also should be included. Things like influenza, typhoid, meningitis, hepatitis. These are all vaccine preventable diseases. I think these should be encouraged to be included in the vaccine card before you travel. I mean, there is no point in giving money from encouraging patients to come to get vaccinated, but good public awareness to remove the vaccine hesitancy. And I think we all need to work together as a society.
Absolutely. And on that note,
thank you
for joining us and spending our precious time. And I would like to thank a big shout out to Eat Right Foundation, Herbalife Nutrition. Thank you for supporting us in this endeavor. Good nutrition is an essential part of an individual's defense against COVID-19. Focus on nutrition and well-being provides opportunities for establishing synergies between public health and equity in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Till then, stay healthy and vaccinate. Namaste. Namaste.